All right, let's jump right in. When you look at the headlines about East Asian politics, you kind of get the feeling that populism is just on the march, right? Like it's this huge wave sweeping across the whole region. But what if that whole story, that entire narrative, is just plain wrong? Today, we're going to challenge that idea, and we're going to do it head on.
And you can see why people ask this question. I mean, the word populist gets thrown around everywhere. It's slopped on all sorts of leaders across East Asia. The list of these so-called populists, the usual suspects, it's pretty long.
You've got figures like Japan's former prime minister, Junichiro Koizumi. He was famous for his theatrical politics and for painting himself as this lone samurai warrior taking on the powerful special interests, even within his own party.
Or how about Indonesia's Joko Widodo? His incredible rags-to-riches backstory and his whole people-first leadership style. It just makes that populist label seem to fit like a glove.
And the list just keeps going. There's Taiwan's Chen Shui-bian, who promised a government of the people, and South Korea's Roh Moo-han, who famously rode this huge online movement all the way to the presidency. See? They all seem to fit the description.
Okay, but here's the big twist. This is where we pump the brakes and question everything. What if I told you that if we use a much stricter, more scientific definition, we find out that this whole populist takeover story is actually a myth?
To really get to the bottom of this, we can't just go by gut feelings or political style. Nope, we need a clear, objective tool. So let's bring in a 3-point litmus test, one that's based on a really rigorous, ideological definition of what populism truly is.
So this definition, it comes from the political scientist Cass Mudde, and it is the absolute key to unlocking this whole thing. See, populism isn't just about being popular or being an outsider. It's a very specific worldview, an ideology, that sees politics as this moral battle between the good, virtuous people and a single corrupt elite.
So our test is super simple. It's just 3 checkpoints. 1, does the leader talk about the pure people? 2, do they wage war against the corrupt elite as one single evil group? And 3, do they claim that the people's general will should crush everything in its path, including institutions like Parliament? To be a real-deal populist, a leader has to check all 3 of those boxes, no exceptions.
All right, now for the fun part. Armed with our brand new litmus test, let's go back and see how those leaders we talked about a minute ago, how they really stack up.
Now this right here is the absolute crucial difference. Being an outsider, a maverick who attacks specific enemies, like Koizumi going after pork barrel politicians, that's one thing. But that is not the same as being a populist who declares all-out war on the entire system, the whole elite, as this single, morally bankrupt blob.
And this is exactly where the whole argument for them being populists just completely falls apart. You see, a lot of them check box number 3. Sure, they love to go around the established institutions, but they totally fail that critical second test. Jokowi, for example, is sometimes called a polite populist precisely because he avoids that core, angry anti-elite attack. They go after rivals, not the system itself. They're mavericks, for sure. But populists? Nope.
Okay, so if pretty much everyone we thought was a populist isn't, does that mean populism just doesn't exist in East Asia at all? Well, not quite. When you sift through all the evidence with our litmus test, it turns out there are 3 major leaders who actually do qualify. They're the exceptions that really prove the rule.
So, meet the trifecta: Joseph Estrada from the Philippines, Thaksin Shinawatra from Thailand, and Prabowo Subianto from Indonesia. Now these 3, unlike all the others, they pass our test with flying colors. And what's so fascinating is how they did it. Each one developed this completely unique, homegrown brand of populism. Estrada's story is just wild. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. He was this huge movie star who always played the hero of the poor, like a Filipino Robin Hood. And he didn't just borrow from his old movies, he literally fused his on-screen character with his political identity. The message was crystal clear. The poor, his fans, they were the pure people, and the rich oligarchs were the villains he was destined to defeat. It was politics as a movie blockbuster, literally. Now, Thaksin Shinawatra's populism in Thailand, that was a whole different flavor. He tapped into this really deep cultural split in the country. He took this existing story of the honest, hardworking rural farmer, the moral, pure people, and pitted them against a corrupt, decadent urban elite in Bangkok. He didn't have to invent this idea. It was already there. He just grabbed it and ran with it, positioning himself as their one true champion. And finally, there's Prabowo Subianto, who built this fiery nationalist brand of populism.
He painted this picture of Indonesia as a nation blessed with incredible riches, but those riches were being stolen, sucked dry by foreign interests, with the help of a corrupt local elite acting as their puppets. In his story, the pure people were the true Indonesian patriots, and the entire establishment was a nest of traitors.
So we have our three genuine populists. But that just begs an even bigger, more interesting question. Why are there only three? And more than that, why did even these populist projects ultimately crash and burn? Well, the answer seems to lie in the political environment itself.
Here's the deal. Populism needs fertile soil to grow, and in East Asia, that ground is just rocky and unwelcoming. The kind of left versus right class struggle that fueled populism in other parts of the world, it's just not essential there. Those big culture wars over globalism versus tradition that you see in Europe, far less intense. Even the whole "I'll defend our national identity" angle struggles, because a strong national identity is already the mainstream view.
But wait, there's more. There's this incredibly powerful counter-idea that dominates political conversations in the region: good governance. This isn't some emotional, moral argument about the will of the people. It's a cool, rational, technocratic pitch about efficiency, skill, and accountability. And it turns out it's basically kryptonite for populism.
And you can see this weapon being used perfectly right here. Estrada? He was brought down by massive protests that were all about his corruption and mismanagement. Thaksin? He was kicked out by a military coup justified by saying they had to restore good governance from his populist lures. And Prabowo? He lost to Jokowi, the ultimate symbol of a competent, get-things-done technocrat. In every single case, the populist lost to the idea of good governance.
So the big takeaway from all of this is pretty clear. The real story isn't a populist takeover. It's a story about a political and ideological environment that is just uniquely resistant to it. You get mavericks and outsiders, sure, but true populism is rare, and it has a really tough time surviving, because the very ideas that shape politics in the region are working against it. And that leaves us with one last, really fascinating question to think about. We've seen why populism has had such a hard time until now, but things change, right? Cultures and political ideas are never frozen in time. As the values and priorities of societies across East Asia continue to shift and evolve, you just have to wonder, how long is this populist resistant climate really going to last?